to be what you want me to be, to find I'm blind to me, to feel so hollow without you, to run my city till blue.
Okay, so that was fixed versus variable. Now let's actually get into magnification power values. What power settings on your scope are going to be appropriate for different applications? So let's start off. We need to, again, review our mission criteria. The answer to this question, what magnification are you going to need in your scope, is contingent upon your mission criteria. You have to consider your target range. How far are you going to be shooting? If you're going to be shooting out to only 600, 800 meters, you're not going to need as much magnification as if you're trying to shoot 2,700 meters, right? So you also need to consider your target size. If you have a very, very small target, like let's say you want to do extreme range varmint hunting, well, that might require a little higher magnification than you would if you're shooting elk. So target size has a huge bearing. Or for combat purposes, a human torso is actually a pretty large target, so it doesn't require near as much magnification as some other things. You also need to consider target movement. Are you going to be shooting at targets that are not moving? If so, then you don't need to worry about field of view. If you are shooting at moving targets, especially fast-moving targets, like if you're deer hunting or if you're going to try to shoot coyotes, and you don't know how close they might present themselves, field of view is going to definitely be an issue, and you don't want to have too much magnification as to limit your field of view. So these are all questions we must ask before we get started. So go ahead and write down in your notebook those different mission criteria, and you need to determine exactly what your mission criteria is. And we'll go over some different magnifications and their appropriateness to these different criteria. One thing that you need to consider as well when you're looking at magnification power values is a thing called eye relief. And eye relief is the distance between your eyeball and the back of the scope, basically. And if you have more power, more magnification, you're going to have less eye relief, generally speaking. So that's another thing to consider as well. On a rifle that might have a lot of recoil, you do want a little bit of eye relief, so you don't get gouged out there too bad. Another thing to consider with generally when we're talking about magnification power settings is that your light transmission will also be contingent upon magnification. The more magnification you have, the more zoomed in on something you're going to have a little bit less light transmission generally. And a big thing a lot of people don't realize is that optical clarity is a huge issue when you're talking about magnification. And a lot of guys think that automatically if you have a higher magnification scope, you're going to be able to see the target better. Well, that's not how that works, because your image clarity and your optical clarity is going to be on the quality of the lenses that you're using. And what happens a lot of times is the guy will get a budget price scope with real high magnification capability, and when they have her cranked all the way up, what they're basically doing is they're zooming in on a distorted image in which the color correction is imperfect and it looks kind of weird and haloed and everything gets kind of skewed. And that's not really helping you see the target any better than if you were at a lower power setting. So generally speaking, there is a point where there's just too much magnification where it's not helping you see any better. So 24 power scope is not always going to be more clear at 24 power. And if you've ever had one in a budget optic, you know what I'm talking about. So optical clarity is contingent more upon glass quality, and you're actually going to amplify problems by increasing your magnification, especially in budget scopes. So that's something you want to be aware of. And another thing you want to be aware of when we're talking about our magnification power values is a thing called exit pupil diameter. Okay? Now, exit pupil diameter is basically the size of the projected image that comes out of the scope that's going to be projected on your eye. And that's basically a simple calculation you can do. You can take the objective lens size of your scope. That's the big front lens on your optic there. The size of that in millimeters, like 42 millimeter scope, and you divide that by the magnification of the scope. So 42 divided by 6. Let's say you have a 6 power scope. And that would equal your exit pupil diameter in millimeters. That's the size of the image being projected onto your eye. And the human eye can only appreciate an image of about 7 millimeters. So if smaller than that, it's going to appear like your image is very small. And it's going to seem like you're looking through a straw or something. It's just not going to be that nice full image. Over 7 millimeters, you're kind of wasting that exit pupil size, but actually it does make for, when you bring the scope up in front of your face, it's going to come into focus a lot quicker because the exit pupil diameter is larger, so it's going to be quicker sight acquisition on your rifle. It's going to seem that way anyways. Now, we're not going to want to encourage you to be out of alignment with your optic. We're going to practice good fundamental shooting techniques here, and we're going to do a video on that before too long. But it still can increase the sight acquisition time to your rifle. If you have a larger exit pupil, I do like to have a larger exit pupil diameter if I can help it. And generally speaking, higher magnification makes for a lower or a smaller exit pupil diameter. So the higher magnification you go, the smaller the image is going to look. And you'll notice that on a variable power scope. If you just sit there and crank it up and down, you're going to have a lot more full image on the lower power settings. So let's look at our different possible missions here. And we got some different applications we're going to go through. Let's talk about military applications and magnifications that would be appropriate for those. We're going to talk briefly about police and SWAT applications and magnification. We're going to talk about long-range hunting, different kinds of hunting, and then we'll talk briefly about target sports. Now, for military applications, I would actually agree with the U.S. military and say that a 10-power optic is going to be about ideal for our purposes. We're talking about long range and extreme range. 10 power is going to give you plenty of magnification for going out to the maximum effective range of most cartridges. You can shoot 1,400 meters at military-sized targets like a human torso quite effectively with the 10-power scope. There's absolutely no need to go any higher than that. In fact, higher than that, all of a sudden you're going to have limited field of view. And for military applications, that's going to be a bad thing. And really, for 10 power is almost too much in a lot of cases because when targets do present themselves closer than you'd like 50 meters, 100 meters, 10 power is going to have a little bit of a restricted field of view at those ranges, but it'll still be effective overall. So that's a good all-round magnification number. And if you asked me, if you just dropped me off anywhere on planet Earth with any kind of rifle and I could only have one scope, or if you said I could only have one particular scope on all my rifles from now on, and they had to be the exact same magnification, what would I pick? And I would actually say that a straight 10 power would be probably the best all-round choice. That would work for pretty much any purpose. That'll work for varmint shooting, it'll work for large game shooting, it'll work for combat, it'll work for police. That's a really good choice, and I think that's why the U.S. military opted to use that. Okay. Now, in certain applications, like extreme range shooting for military, like hard target interdiction teams where they're shooting at extreme ranges, like over 2,000 meters, and they're planning their mission to where they're not really going to be closer than 1,000. In those cases, for those big 50 cals and some of those setups, I would maybe see where a 16 power optic would actually be suitable for that. But other than that, anything more than 10 is a bit much. Maybe 12 would be okay, but a 16 is definitely too much for most applications. And like we said before, if you do have a 16 power scope, you're going to have to make sure that you have a really high quality piece of glass. You're going to spend a lot of money to make sure that your optical clarity is still good. Because a lot of times you get a 16 power scope and a budget optic, and you're zooming in on optical imperfections. So you're not going to be seeing any more clearly than you would have with the lower power setting. In fact, you're going to be seeing less clearly. So 10 power is great for military applications and for all-round applications. Also, for military applications, you can do a variable power scope, like I said before, but it's going to have to be a very high-quality optic with a first focal plane reticle if you do go for variable power. So that's the limitation there. So either one of those is fine. For police applications, for police and SWAT, I did choose to include it in here because a lot of people are going to be curious. But this is not really applicable to what we're talking about, because police and SWAT applications is not what we're going to be considering long-range shooting. When we talk about long-range, we're talking about, 800 meters plus. And your average police sniper engagement range, I think, for like a SWAT teams and SRT teams is like less than 60 yards. I think it's 40 or 60 meters is the average engagement range for a police sniper. And that is what we would consider for our applications to be point-blank range. So it's a whole nother ball game, really, too. They're shooting at in hostage situations. So basically, some of the scopes they like to use are more of your Varmint-style scopes or your tactical style scopes that are kind of patterned after the Varmint style. And really, for those, second focal plane is not going to hinder you that much because you're so close. They're not even going to be using that ranging reticle for hold off for windage or anything. So, I mean, it's possible that if you're on a sheriff's department in a rural setting, that a ranging reticle would be more handy because they'd actually be getting out to a couple hundred meters. But in history, there's only been 1 or 2 times where a police sniper has had to take shots much over 100 meters. So that's very, very rare in that field. So it's not really applicable. That's comparing apples and oranges here. So for police and SWAT applications, they do like to have variable power scopes so they can zoom in and identify the target because they're going to be shooting at a bad guy or whatever, or they might be shooting at a bad guy who's hiding behind a hostage, and they want to make sure that they got a good zoom in. And the variable power is not going to throw off their point of impact at 40 meters or 60 meters. Enough to even be measurable. At 1,000 meters, you're going to have problems, but at the ranges we're talking about here, not a problem. Okay, long-range hunting. It depends on what you're hunting, I guess, to determine which power you're going to need. For large game, at extreme and long range, a 10-power scope is a great choice. Like if you're shooting at elk or something at 800 or 1,000 meters, that's a good choice. Even 6 power is great. If you're shooting at an animal that could move fast, like a deer, like a white-tailed deer that's going to probably be running away from you, and it might be, these animals are going to present themselves at ranges that you might not be ready for, too. So if a deer pops up at 100 meters or 80 meters and starts running, you don't want to have too much magnification. So for a lot of hunting applications, a fixed 4-power might be a good choice, or a 6-power for large game hunting applications where the target will be moving. 10 power if you plan more on using it for extreme range more of the time. But I would not go over 10 power for any large game hunting application. Now, if you're hunting varmints like coyotes, I would be very hesitant to use a 10 power. That'd actually be too much. Even though it's a smaller target, it's going to be moving extremely fast, and you're going to want that field of view. So I would say a 4 or 6 power, like a battle carbine optic, like a guy would use on an AR-15 or something. That would be a good choice for like a coyote that's going to be moving fast. So, or for hunting, you can also do the high quality variable power scopes with the first focal plane reticles. And this might be suitable for extreme range varmint hunting like prairie dogs. If you're going to shoot prairie dogs at 1,000 meters, that's a small target, and that's extremely far for that size of a target. A variable power with a little bit more zoom might be handy, like, if getting up to 15 power, perhaps 16, 20 power. For varmint hunting, for gophers and stuff, they're not going to be running very fast, but they're going to be very small. That's where one of those variable power scopes might be kind of handy. But you do need to consider that you're going to have to get a very high quality optic, and it's going to cost you. Otherwise, if you're shooting at prairie dogs or something, 10 power is usually enough. or 16 power if you plan on only using the rifle for extreme range, small target shooting. And that goes for target sports as well. Fixed 10 powers are very effective for most target sports. 16 power, again, is kind of a lot. Even if I was using a rifle for target sports, unless I was shooting at paper targets or something, and they're going to measure the group sizes for competition, I would not get a 16 power. It's just going to limit your field of view so much. If you got a target pop up or you're trying to locate your target through the optic, the 16 is going to limit you in a lot of ways. Plus, we talked about zooming in on a target with too much power. Unless you have really good quality glass, you're not seeing the target any more clearly with this 16 power optic, unless you're spending a couple $1,000s on glass. So unless you're planning on spending the big money, I wouldn't go up to 16 power. That would probably not help you very much. Unless, of course, like we talked about before, you're going to be spotting for yourself, or you do want to use it for windage, for calculating wind by spotting for mirage. And we'll talk about that more later. But those are some applications where variable is nice. But again, anytime you get a variable, you get a whole host of complications. You want to make sure you have a high-quality optic. Okay, so that was our topic of magnification. Next, we're going to talk about reticles.